Hello, 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 fellow humans.
Well, welcome to the Rise of Humanness podcast, where we explore what it means to stay human in a world increasingly run by algorithms, bots, and machines. I'm Mike Schindler.
And I'm Chris Nolan.
And together, we're going to show you how to stay absolutely powerful
Stay human.
and rise and thrive in the age of AI.
Yes, and even show you how to beat the bots. Well, let's rise.
The rise of humanness in the age of AI. It's a podcast with Chris and Mike. The rise of humanness in the age of AI. Stay curious, stay human, let's rise.
I don't know if I pinged you back on this, but I did get it's just kind of an interesting little story because I've been doing these Substack series, which it sounds like you tuned into, but basically a top editor at HarperCollins has been following me. And
wow.
to be fair, I knew her for a while, but yeah, she approached me. She said, "Pete, you got a book here. Like, are you doing a book on this?" And I said, "Yeah, I am," because I had developed a proposal actually ready to go, but I didn't have the right agent because I've done two other books, but my agent is since retired. That guy.
Yeah.
So I didn't have the right agent. I was kind of like, okay, I'm going to eventually get to it later this summer or something. So I sent her the proposal, and she was like, just wanted to do it. So without an agent, without an auction, I just cut a deal with them, and they took the worldwide rights to really nice advance. So it gives me the space to really write and do it right. And so I've got a great. So if you want to introduce it like that, I've now the Great Progression is going to be. It's coming out. What's going to be a total, one of their prime pieces for. Again, this is how books work, right? So I'm delivering it in April. It's going to come out in January of 27. I hate to say it because it makes it look sound a lot like. But the reason that's interesting is it's the beginning of the presidential primaries. It's kind of the beginning of the next big shift of what people are going to do. And so they see it as, and this is kind of related to how we're talking about it, is it's not just a tech book. It's really it's about how it impacts the economy, society, politics, geopolitics.
I see that.
And so that's kind of where they're like, oh, let's get that book for that period. And so they've already secured it. And then the Substack thing is just booming too. So anyhow, I'm just kind of saying in terms of that framing, it's resonating out there. And so, yeah, I think if we want to go into that as much as we want to go into it, I'm happy to
we can definitely bring that up in the session.
Oh, I would for sure.
Yeah.
Well, it's huge.
Yeah.
Huge given. I know I think Mike might kind of hard out, so I'm going to make him really nervous here. This is fun.
If you haven't heard out, well, let's just go. Let's jump in.
This is what Chris does to me, Pete. He does this all the time.
It's so important. I don't know if you saw, the news that Google just kicked OpenAI's ass last week, a top 10 across the board by margin, whoa, and then of course, Google's, what's his name? Sergey. I mean, he's now out of retirement back because he goes, the singularity's right around the corner, right? You go, what? I'm leaning in now. And then the other one was Anthropic because they can program the AI to beat AI. I think it's now up to 20 to 30. I think it's 40, because Anthropic's really good at agentic. 40%. So literally they just say, look, here's the markers that Google just set last night. Can you beat them? And it does in a day. So your thing, which is like, hey, folks, let's get on board here with how this is going to change society.
Yeah, I'm kind of the repercussions. Although the other thing last week was, don't undercount, OpenAI getting Johnny Ives on the team. I mean, that's another big one too. So anyhow, it was like a crazy week. Every week it's kind of crazier. You're kind of like, oh, okay.
By the way, if we're going out, because I don't know, we think we have a homecoming there. I love that restaurant. That's Cafe Zoetrope that they were at. You remember where they were meeting in the film?
Yep.
It'd be great to go down there, and have great Caesar salads, chicken.
Oh yeah.
So let's just contrast this. Disney paid $4 billion for the entire Star Wars franchise. That's a lot of IP. That's dolls and movies and TV shows. Johnny Ives had no IP. $6.5 billion.
Yeah, no, it is pretty, but it was a
Oh,
stock
a stock,
too.
yeah, sure.
So it's not like had it exactly cashed the
Exactly.
way
It's
Disney did
pretty
it.
good
Just
stock, though. Well, Mike, do you remember what you have to say?
yeah,
Do I remember what I have to say? Well, let's kick it off.
yeah. Let's get. Could you our hard out at the top of the hour? Is that what I'm looking
Yeah,
at here?
top of
Yeah,
the
and then
hour.
we
Yeah.
like to see Mike sweat just around.
Yeah, he loves it, Pete. He loves it.
Well, I'm
So
happy to keep it also tighter and stuff. I've been doing this
no,
for a
no, no,
long
no.
time.
We love going
Yeah,
down rabbit
Peter and
holes.
I'll just take
Yeah.
over, Mike. You go
Yeah.
do your thing.
Yeah.
Go
Except
ahead.
I have
All
to.
right, let's go.
Yeah. Good. Well, hey, everybody, welcome back to the Rise of Humanness with Chris and Mike, where we make everybody on this show a superstar. But, here's where I'm really excited today is our guest today, Pete Leyden, is a rock star. And this is truly where we invite guests they're shaping the minds for the future. And Pete is one of these guys from his experience with Wired, through just the technological field. He's got this whole thing called the Great Progression now from 2025 to 2050. We're going to break into that. And I got to tell you that Chris is probably going to take this show over today because
Oh,
he's
no.
so excited when we have these
Okay,
amazing
all
guests
right.
on. So, Chris,
Yeah.
what did you want to say before we get?
Well, I wanted to welcome everybody to the Rise of Humanness. This is a show where we delve into what it means to be human in an increasingly automated, uncertain world, which is why it's perfect that Peter's here. Peter's probably, if you're freaked out about the future, he's going to put you at ease, we hope.
We hope, yeah.
He's an optimist, I would say, about it, and in many different areas, from society to how it's going to elevate humanness, which is, Mike, what we're all about too. So
Yeah,
it
that's
really
right.
jives with what we're coming from. So let's just say, welcome to Peter Leyden. And by the way, he's probably, I don't know if you're on the list, but I count you as one of the top futurists in the world.
Well, I appreciate that. Well, thanks for having me on, but I appreciate that compliment. I don't know what list you're talking about, but I'm happy to be
Well,
part
it's
of
that
it.
one. It's the one our friend Garrett keeps bringing up. And
But no, I have been around this for long. I mean, I guess I do call myself futures, but I think of it as more of a thought leader on the future. I do a lot of, I'm kind of a tech expert, particularly around AI now, but also a thought leader on the future is the way I frame it. A little more than sometimes futurist people take that word and they take it in a different way. And to me, I spend a lot of time with very concrete ways of thinking about this and impacting real business people today. It's kind of more like strategic foresight is what I spend my time thinking about.
Well, you're the founder of Reinvent Futures. You have that.
That is my company now.
That is a senior advisorship, right?
Yeah, and I did work with the pioneers of, you could say, the strategic foresight field and like scenario planning and that, in which when I was younger, we spent a lot of time like advising top agencies in the government, global companies. Steven Spielberg, since you're the Hollywood guy, came to us at the company I was working for is called Global Business Network. And it was really, we would help Spielberg figure out what was Washington, D.C. going to look like in 2050 as the background for Minority Report, that film that I'm sure you guys probably knew.
Absolutely.
And so all those pieces of the puzzle wasn't Spielberg thinking about it. It was a team from Global Business Network, our team, with all these top thinkers to figure out, hey, this is what it's going to look like and how this world's going to happen. And actually, if you remember that film, it was 20 years ago, but a lot of that stuff's already happened.
Oh, you're spot on, especially with all the videos and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Although the one that wasn't anyhow, let's don't go down that rabbit hole. But
no, go down the rabbit hole.
Oh, it's a great story. Keep going.
Well, one was that all the people we brought together in the team said, "There's no way we're going to drive cars up buildings. That's just dumb, and it's not going to happen." But I don't know if, but Spielberg said for the story, he had to have the car going up the building. So Cruise is in the thing. I don't know if you remember it, but it's not going to fall. And so anyhow, there were a few violations of what the consensus was possible. But in general, a lot of what was laid out there, he adapted and put it in, and it's totally smack on.
Was it a self-driving car, or was he driving it?
Oh, that's interesting. As I'm thinking right now, I don't think it was driving. I think it did come, but it was this idea like that's just a dumb way to do it. We're never going to go up. No, to think of it, he actually was driving it. That way,
It just doesn't make sense because
which doesn't make sense. Exactly. In 2050, they won't have.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Chris, kick it off with the first question. I mean, there's so many questions we got for you, Pete. So,
okay, well, I mean, I don't want to start it. Well, I guess I'll start off with the biggest one here. So you describe the next 25 years, which is why Peter's so unique and we're so happy to have the show. He really sees the Great Progression as this historic window where we're not collapsing, but we're upgrading, we're elevating, we're evolving into something else. We're on a kind of a cusp of reinvention, if not a renaissance, right, Peter?
Yeah, and I could talk that out. You
Yeah.
want me to go there and run with it?
Yeah. So, also, how does AI fit into, or technology, all this fit into this vision you have of this, more abundant future, so to speak?
Okay, so one way, just my starting point for this, and maybe all your guests are like this, or many, but is that, AI is a world historic technology. It is a fundamental world game changer, world changer thing. But it also, from the wheel to the printing press to electricity, I mean, there's been these fundamental tech shifts, but AI is really in its own category. The only one I would say that's really interestingly comparable is the machine, the steam engine that was invented basically during the Enlightenment period at the early beginnings of the Industrial Revolution. And one of the reasons for that is that the steam engine, essentially humans had just used their own muscle power and maybe hanging on to a horse or something to plow until they got an engine that could augment that physical power to the tune of like 200 horses, that kind of power. And that augmentation of our physical power literally was the dynamo that really spawned the entire Industrial Revolution. Much of the modern world that we think of today, all the prosperity, all the kinds of things that we kind of take for granted now, was really rooted in that kind of phase shift in terms of a machine that could do physical power that humans were limited to for thousands of years before that. The same thing has happened now with intelligence. Up until now, anything to do with intelligence had to have a human brain to it. Even the simplest tasks. If you had to sense what's going on in the world, if you had to make reasonable kind of calculations of what's probably going to happen and make decisions on something, that's a human. Even if it's a simple little thing of grabbing a ticket on a car going through a toll booth or something. Until now. And so now we actually have machines that are augmenting our mental powers, our intelligence, and is able to actually not just amplify it or augment it to do things it can never do, but essentially replicate it and kind of do things autonomously that we don't have to do anymore. And that is a phase shift that's even a bigger deal than electricity or, kind of even the internet or some of these other things that, added new capabilities to humans. But this is like such a fundamental capability that is now a machine can do. That is a phase change that goes beyond just like, hey, this is going to affect the economy, this is going to affect the society, which it is. But this is where I start to even think about it. It's almost really a civilizational scale change, which is the ability to do this now and the ability to, from now on, by the way, we're making this step change of human capabilities. There's no going back from this. I mean, it's like the age of AI is opening up and we're never going back. Like humans for centuries, forever, they're going to have these intelligent machines woven into the world. And so just like when we got to the Bronze Age, we kind of had metals in our lives and we didn't unwind it, or the digital age, we didn't go off of that. There are these threshold technologies that do that, and that's absolutely one of them. So if you start with that as the kind of game changer, then you start to look to patterns in history of where fundamental technology changes. What has it done beyond the technology? How does it affect the economy? How does it affect the society? And then ultimately for the big ones, how does it affect civilization? And it turns out that's how I've been kind of thinking about this next 25 years. Without taking too much from this first question, I would say what's happening now on the smallest level, there's a parallel to what happened in the 90s when I was at Wired, worked with the founders of Wired magazine. We had the introduction of the internet, and the people were like, in the 90s, we were like, well, who cares about the internet? What happens if you connect everyone? Like,
I remember
Amazon,
those days.
What's the deal? I have this Amazon thing, who cares? Whatever, it's selling a few books online. It doesn't matter. But if you thought it through for the next 25 years, from the mid 90s, say 95 till 2020, which is what I did. So with my first book, actually, was doing that 25-year span.
The long boom, right?
The long boom, which was trying to say, hey, folks, when you really think this thing through, all these things are going to happen and it's going to fundamentally change the world. And I would say largely positive ways. And that book, very successful. We passed 2020, and most of the stuff we said from the mid-90s came to do. I had a co-author in that, a famous futurist called Peter Schwartz. So when I say we, it was the two of us. Yeah. But now we got this thing with AI, and I'm kind of making another 25-year thing. It's going to take about 25 years to for it to play out, although there's some acceleration there that we can get into a little bit later. But I'm trying to say, like, look at how much, look at how the world can fundamentally change. Look at how many things could happen on this thing. Knowing full well there's risk, and there's things that, there's plenty of doomers, there's plenty of people saying, watch out, watch out. But I'm trying to open up more the positive possibilities of this, the potential of this stuff, and get people to see something it's hard for them to see now. Just like it was hard. Like I remember in the mid-90s at Wired, people would say, well, no, people will never put their credit card on the internet. That's like crazy. Who's
so
crazy?
true. It's so
Or, I mean, there was like all these things, right? Well, it's kind of now. It's like people are saying, well, who's ever going to let an AI drive your car?
Take my information, please.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, so I think there is a role here to roll it out. Now, so there's a technological parallel you could throw here. But by the way, AI is going to be way bigger than the internet. But I would just say you can see how that works. Oh, it takes a while. And when it happens, and people at the time when it first arrives, you don't really understand it. But the bigger thing, which I think is how a lot of my great progression goes into it, is it fundamentally changes the economy and society so much that you really kind of recreate essentially the world in some fundamental ways. And so the last time America went through one of those changes was really coming off the Great Depression, World War II, and which had its own set of new technologies, mainframe computers, which was invented during the war, plastics, we think now they're ubiquitous. That was a breakthrough. Commercial aircraft. I mean, all kinds of things that came out of the World War II and the pre-war period where it was just kind of nascent and rolled into this 25 years of progress. I mean, we talk about the great post-war boom from the 1945 to 1970. That was 25 years. What was it doing? It was taking these new technologies. It was redesigning the whole society. It was building infrastructure like, interstate highway systems in the suburbs and all the stuff built on those technologies, internal combustion engine, all that stuff that had been developed. And so now we look back and it's like, oh, great economic boom, awesome thing. It changed the world in fundamental ways. For the good, largely, some things for the worse. And I think we're in another one of those too. So there's a kind of two ways. Think of it as the tech is just going to roll out in the next 25 years and how that shapes it. But then how the society evolves and morphs and grows and booms off that. And that is kind of what I'm trying to explain in this Substack series, which is called The Great Progression 2025 to 2050. Which is a very popular thing. It's booming on Substack, but also it's my next book, which is going to be coming out with HarperCollins, which is trying to explain that to not just America, but it's got the foreign rights. It's going to explain it to the world. So we're in this unbelievably interesting moment that people will look back on for centuries. I mean, they're going to be saying this for 500 years from now. They're going to look back the way we look at the Enlightenment, or we look at, we look back at, different periods of history where things really fundamentally changed. Industrial Revolution, like I made mention to. Anyhow, these parallels are there. We're in it now. And that's the exciting thing, but it's also totally daunting because it is bringing up all kinds of challenges, all kinds of, challenging.
Well, let's dive into that, Peter, because you talk about this as kind of this decade as the turbulent, transitional era, right? Where but one that you say that's necessary. So where do you believe, 2020 to 2030, maybe even 2035, you say it's, kind of preparing us in terms of these human systems. Dive into that. Like, what does that mean? Because people are feeling pretty chaotic, uncertain, not sure what's going to happen, but you're saying this is necessary. So break it down.
Totally. Well, here's the way to think about it is, looking at the demographics of us here on this. I mean, for anyone who's been around for a while, for the last 40 years, let's say, the world has been a relatively stable system, to be fair.
Yep.
We had, and there's a way I talk about this with senior execs all the time, but we understood energy was carbon energy. We understood politics was kind of dominated by the boomer generation. We actually had a relatively conservative politics, unleashing the private sector, all kinds of work was all physical. You went to offices or factories. Anyhow, there's a bunch of things that just were the norms that everyone got used to. And also we know how to make money in that. Oh, we know how to, everyone's comfortable with that. That world is kind of all it's kind of running out of steam, but it's also causing all these kind of problems like climate change and others from the carbon energies. And so that is a world that is increasingly going away, the way I think about it. And what's happening though, in every one of these categories, and this is beyond AI stuff, we're watching nascent systems being built and coming off of these new technologies. So in terms of clean energy, oh, we're watching solar scaling. Oh my God, wind transportation, it's not internal combustion engine, it's like electric. Oh, how that's going to work, you know?
Yeah.
Okay, now and you can just go around the whole, and it's like, it's not dominated by the boomers anymore. It's like, oh, there's these millennials, they have different values. They want to come to power. You know, and then you realize, oh, it's not, work isn't physical. Here we are, virtual. It's like, holy shit, how does that mean? You know, how does that affect things? And anyhow, I can go through the whole thing, and when I do talks to like senior execs, I run through a whole litany of them. But the point being is there's a new world that's emerging, and this old one coming down, and we're in the gap. We're in the gap year. We're in the 10-year chasm, you could say, between those two, where the new thing is not clear enough in people's minds, so it's freaking everybody out. And the old thing is still workable enough that you can squeeze the juice from it. And so we're in this middle ground, and that is the hardest thing for people. Now, what I say about the great progression, and this is what I keep saying, is like, if you can see the world, I have a graphic I use all the time. Unfortunately, we could, if it's, I guess the YouTube
send it to us, we'll put it up.
But there's a kind of, the one world is winding down and the other world is winding up, and we are right between these two things. And what I'm trying to describe is the thing that's ramping up over those next 25 years. Just like if in 1945 you would have said, hey, eventually we're going to have suburbs with an interstate freeway system, and everyone's going to live in these things, and they're going to drive, and then you're going to have drive-in movies, and you're going to have, you know, all this stuff. And they're sitting there in 1945. They're like, well, how's that going to work? You know?
Yeah.
No way. How are you going to build all that stuff? Well, you know, I'm living in.
I just got electricity 4 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a kind of a, but if you explain that to people, they're like, oh, well, that seems good to me. I mean, why not? I'd rather do that than, you know, my, you know, whatever tenement in New York City where I'm kind of taking a streetcar to my, you know, work, whatever. And so the thing is, it's a matter of, and you guys are kind of into this, the big picture, thinking long-term, understanding system changes. If you kind of see it like I see it, and then you explain it to people, a lot of times people just like a big bang, it just hits them like, oh shit, yeah, that would be better. Like, and I think that's where AI is coming in here. I think what's happening is we're in such early days of that. They're thinking, well, my job's going to get lost, or I don't know how to make money in that, or my kid, what are they going to do? This schooling is going to be, you know, is this college education even going to be worth it? I mean, that's where we are now. But if you look at it 25 years arc, you go, holy shit, the stuff we could do with this stuff.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what my job is. And that's kind of what I do. So that's the great.
You know, we're in such agreement with you because, and I hope people, by the way, really, this is why I said I consider you a futurist, even though you wrote the first book with a futurist, is that a lot of your stuff happened. A lot of stuff in that happened in your first book. So people listening, you know, our audience, you know, listen to what Peter's saying, because he's got a bead on it, right? He's done it once already.
He's got a crystal ball probably in that back.
He's got a little crystal ball. But let's talk about this thing, because I think this is really, when we have folks, we have a panel here in San Francisco on a similar area we're talking about, which has to do with the operating system that we're in right now. And Mike and I talk about not just the operating system of the system, but of human beings.
Yeah.
How, you've heard Peter Diamandis says this too, where we're dealing with really a 1.0 system that's been around for 1 million years. And now we have this alien that's saying, whoa, you know, it's kind of challenging that system, just that system. And that alien intelligence is also saying, no, like you said, your operating system of what you're doing now, where you can just add me to this and add me to that and add me to that task, or figure out a job where I can use AI, that doesn't work. This is like your phone. You know, you had 1.0, no, and you're not using 9.0. No, you're in the Stone Age. So let's talk about that and the foundation of what you see may be this new operating system. And what misconceptions do people have about AI's role in that system?
Okay, well, now we start getting kind of, so what's been interesting is, up until now, I've been cautious about using the word that we're heading into civilization scale change, and because it's just so big for people, they just kind of like, okay, I can't do it. So when I do a lot of public speaking to keynotes, I go to business audiences, the whole thing is like, they're hard enough to be thinking that get them to think 2 years out or 1 year out or 3 years, let alone a decade.
Yeah,
But if you start talking about, whoa, 25 and then
yeah.
civilization, it kind of freaks them out. But I will say for the sake of this podcast, I don't know who exactly your audience is. That's one way to start thinking about this, which is Diamandis is kind of going, is humans 1.0 all the way from the million. I would say the way I think about it, let's frame it that way. I think about it as the world we know on the most fundamental level. It was essentially the modern civilization, Western civilization, was essentially reinvented in the Enlightenment and in what became the early Industrial Revolution. So when I think the Enlightenment, it's kind of like the 1680s through the 18th century to kind of to 1800. And as part of that world, we invented the core foundational, what I call like mega inventions. They were like changed how humans work. One was that steam engine. It was like, holy shit, we can do that. But there were other ones too. There was industrial production, off those steam engines, we like, oh my God, we can kind of do this and you can crank out way more stuff than ever. That was a huge shift. Yeah. It had to be invented. But once it was invented, we just fill the world with all kinds of stuff. And then there was also
stuff, so people live longer too.
Yeah. But there's also like financial capitalism. People don't remember this, but we had to invent financial capitalism, to kind of bring the money in to fund those things. And then we had to invent in the plot. Then it went beyond the economy and stuff. It went into representative democracy. I mean, that's what America was in the Enlightenment. Our role at the very end of that period was we invented representative democracy. Up until then, it was always divine right of kings. And, we didn't know how to get everyone's ideas into a democracy. Yeah. We finally did. And then also nation states, there's another one. Anyhow, the point being is that there was an explosion of what you'd have to say is civilization scale change. It doesn't, get done in 10 days or, 10 years it's done. No, this was a long period of time, but also it's been lasting. We've been in it for 250, 300 years, right? I mean, we're celebrating this year, I think, the 250th anniversary of American Revolution or the beginning of America, which was the end of that Enlightenment period. But anyhow, the point is, all I'm kind of saying this is we're in one of those now, is what I'm saying. Is that the fundamental level of AI, working with intelligent machines, is at a level that it could be so different from the way we've done things before, that it's not just iterating, we kind of extend a little, let's add a little AI here and it'll just extend this old way of doing things, and that's the wrong way to think about it. And that's why, honestly, a lot of people do think about it now. And but I think it takes, again, it's a little scarier for people, but I think what we got to really thinking about is like, almost start from scratch and just think, okay, we're humans, now we have intelligent machines. Is like, what are we going to do going forward? Assuming that those things are solid, they're good, they're growing, they're going to be whatever. There's a bunch of, but they're proving themselves. In the last few years, we're seeing this. It's not just some dreamy thing. Yeah. What's happening? So then we got to think about, well, how would you build systems differently on that? And here's where it gets, why I kind of get into this different mindset, which is like, if you were to invent an educational system now that had individual tutors for everybody from a first grader to grad work, and for that matter, lifelong learners. And you said, we have this tool and we need to educate kids and educate young people to deal with the world. Would you just graft that onto this old system that was invented in medieval times, honestly, where you kind of get a tutor around, a table of 10 people and you lecture them? And no, you probably wouldn't do it. You'd start differently. You still have humans involved, and you'd still have profs that are smarter than everybody, and you'd still have, all the social cues and networking you'd learn in school and socialization and younger school. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that humans are still part of that, but you would actually build the thing around a very different tool. It's like, this tool will know that kid forever, could go over the math problem for the thousands times, where the one teacher in 30 class, kids in 30 that couldn't do it. And anyhow, you'd have a whole different system and it'd be fundamentally different and it'd be awesome. And the same, you can do healthcare like that. You can go through all these things. So there's a kind of a like, wow, we got a tool now that you could actually face these systems fundamentally differently and redesign them from scratch. And if you did, and by the way, you could do it starting now. I mean, these things are good enough to actually start down that pathway now, not like, oh, someday we'll figure this out. No, we could do it now. So anyhow, that thing is a kind of mind-blowing thing. And that becomes a kind of a, like, that's where I start using, when you're building like that, you're in a different kind of forward motion civilization scale change. And so that, you mentioned something about how you lead in that or how you think about that. So that is a mental shift that very few people are making now. Maybe we can't get people to move too fast on that. But I would say in this 25-year span, you're going to see that increasingly be the way people are going to think. I've also, in talking to people, people think, well, how can we change the corporation, these global corporations, to make the most of AI? And there is a way to graft that in, and people are trying to do that. But almost certainly what's going to happen is there's going to be these startups that start from scratch with AI, and they're going to essentially reinvent what it is to be a company with AI. And they're going to be the ones that are really going to show the difference, and it's going to be hard for these legacy things to move. It's going to be hard for legacy government, for all the kind of trauma that, Trump and them are doing in dismantling the old bureaucratic government. There's something to be said that you just can't slap a little AI on top of that bureaucratic system and think you're going to really fundamentally reinvent the way, much more efficient, much more effective government. Maybe we need to kind of rebuild off of these new foundations of kind of AI first kind of ways of kind of, dealing with government. Anyhow, I'm kind of going all over the place, but I'm saying, that's what I'm saying. This is a big deal. It's like, it's holy shit. We could be doing so many things differently.
Well, Peter, you're talking about a pruning stage. That's what you're talking about. I mean, people are going through this pruning, right? Individuals, governments, industries, everything's going through a pruning, which is very painful. And, I think AI, we've talked about how AI is responsible for job loss and uncertainty and all this other stuff. So and you're talking about people who are having a hard time wrapping their brain around this. Like, how do I compete? So what would you say? What's the advice to somebody who's trying to stay relevant in this time? Like, you describe it, but what would you tell somebody? This is how you stay relevant in this chaos. How do they do
this? This is for Mike, this question.
Yeah.
Sorry?
That's right. For my personal question.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Well, first of all, you got to remember how I think about this. And again, it's looking at back in history.
Yeah.
Every single new technology, and I think AI is going to be no different, is what essentially a new technology does is it just solves a problem that humans have already solved, and that liberates humans to go to the next level problem. Complexity or of difficulty or whatever else. And this has been going on from square one. I mean, the beginning of the country we just mentioned, 90% of the people were farmers, right? There's like less than 1% now. And we all are fed. In fact, we have so much food we export it, right? But does that lead to mass unemployment in the United States? No. I mean, in fact, today you can't find anyone to work for anybody because it's tight as a drum, And so it's because we just keep moving up the food chain of, okay, sorry, great, let a tractor automate itself and pick a bazillion pieces of cotton. We don't need slaves to do it anymore. I mean, it's a good thing too, it's not always a bad thing to displace, kind of labor. But anyhow, the point is this happened over and over and over again. And we've watched it in every different type. Now, what it hasn't done, because I told you we haven't been able to cross this threshold, is intellectual work. Knowledge work. It hasn't been able to do that because machines couldn't do that level of complexity and nuance and whatever, but it can now. So I think what we're going to see is we're going to see a giant sorting taking place. Now, for anybody who's a curious, intellectually adaptable, kind of just versatile human, you're going to be fine. You're going to, you're going to be moved up the food chain into like, the next set of problems that, the AI isn't going to figure out because it doesn't know how to figure it out, because it doesn't need some empathy or it needs some social skills or it needs, whatever, all these things that humans are kind of uniquely positioned for. And so we're going to move those people into those problems and we'll get the other stuff solved. And it'll actually be, by the way, they're going to solve a lot cheaper. So it'll allow us to kind of have more, you mentioned this word abundance a little bit earlier. This is one of the flash words now because we're starting to think, wow, maybe these technologies can lead to more abundance. So let me just give you a concrete way, because I was going on about the education. Rich people have always had tutors. If you need your kids needs help in an SAT test to get into a good college, you just hire them. It's a college kid that come in, they tutor your kid. Like, there's no problem. Kids, they've all that. Who hasn't had them is everybody who can't afford a human teacher, right? And pay that extra thing. So what happens if for $20 a month you got, or the equivalent or probably less in 5 years, everyone gets tutored. I mean, that's abundance. That's like, wow, everybody
That's
gets
a
a tutor for
great
nothing,
point.
like, or close to
Yeah.
nothing. That's
Yeah.
a good thing for everybody. And then not only in America, it's like that same kid in, Namibia could be getting that tutoring. So, I mean, there's a kind of sense like, holy shit, this technology can lead to abundance and all that. But what I'm trying to say is in terms of there is a lot of tasks that, honestly, the machines are going to do just as well, if not better. And
Yeah,
they're
for
certainly going to do
sure.
it cheaper. And then what you're going to do is you're going to move the humans on to the next sort of task. And here's the deal. Jobs are nothing more than problem solving. I mean, it is just what it
Yeah,
is.
that's
I've
right.
had 3 startups. I mean, why do I hire people? They're going to solve problems for my startup.
Yep, that's
It
it.
is like until the world runs out of problems, we got plenty of job opportunities. Who's going to solve the crisis and loneliness in, nursing homes, or who's going to deal with the teen kind of problem of suicide or whatever? There's a million problems, and so the idea that we don't have problems that we can't throw people at who use their human skills as well as the AI to kind of help solve it, that's nutty. So that's kind of what I would say is. And
How do you
so
get
it
around
does
it?
take flexibility. Now, the flip side of that, I will say, is the people who say, oh, I'm not moving. Oh, I'm not going to check this thing out. Or, oh, I'm going to stick with this old way.
Yep.
I love the old way. Those people are going to have a problem. And they really are. And the older you are, usually that's the hardest thing for you to do. And so that is going to be a problem. And there is going to be collateral damage. And there are going to be people that are going to refuse to move. And they're going to just be laid off. Or they're going to be taken care of. We're going to have to figure out some way of universal basic income or something in this transition to help people that are going to have a hard time transitioning. I'm not going to sugarcoat the transition. It's going to be difficult for some people. But for most people, honestly, with a little mental adjustment here and a little kind of forward motion thinking, and particularly young people who are like not that happy with their job now, and like, hey, the barista, working at whatever is like, hey, what if you could do something different and get paid and paid better?
Yeah.
Anyhow, there's a bunch of ways to think about this positively, but that's one way to start
Well,
thinking.
that's great. Well, the thing so there's a double-edged sword here that has to do with, and this is our friend Gerd Leonard talks about this. So the Great Progression, it talks about long-term thinking,
Yeah.
which really impacts all of this, right?
Yeah.
So, but here's interesting, and we just talked about how Google last week came and just, kicked OpenAI's butt, was number 1 in all categories, and then overnight Anthropic came back. So that's what you would call a short-term economy, right?
Yeah.
So you have this collision of long-term thinking, and then people go, how do we beat them tomorrow? How do we beat them tomorrow? So how does that impact? Of course, long-term thinking also has to do with what are we doing as we're approaching the singularity
Yeah.
at lightning speed. And so what's the leadership mindset with this long-term thinking, this short-term economy, yet the responsibility of what are we doing, right?
Yeah.
So quickly.
Yeah, good frame there. Well, this is one of the reasons that motivated me to actually write this series, by the way,
Yeah.
in Substack, which again, anyone can do. It's free in terms of the writing.
please check that
I do
out.
weekly essays and I
Yeah,
got
that's
interviews
right.
and stuff. Although once I get deeper into the book, I might not be as frequent. But the point is, and the reason I'm doing this book, and then also I do a lot of public speaking on this in keynotes and stuff.
Yeah.
But one of the reasons I'm trying to do that is to get people seeing the bigger picture, what's happening, and also reorienting around that. So there's just one bigger recognition of what's happening. But I will tell you, and I want to modify a little bit what you're saying there. AI is rapidly changing and evolving fast. I personally do not think, and this is a lot of AI experts I know, and I know a lot of them have been in Silicon Valley here for 30 years, do not think we're going to get to this point where they're going to be super intelligent, they're going to be beyond us, they're going to take over, and we're going to be kind of like cattle or something.
Yeah.
That kind of fear is one that, just to be fair, is overblown. I mean, never say never with humans. I mean, in a century or something, we might be up against that problem. But in terms of our near-term 25-year horizon here, or even 50-year, if you want to go there, that's not going to happen. So what we're going to have, they're going to hit a kind of a point where they will be absolutely kick-ass tools, but they're not going to be taken over from us and running lives. That's my thing. Then you can debate that, and other people debate that. But my sense is, and I'm getting this from 90% of the AI experts I know, and I know a lot of them.
Yeah.
So the point is, if you take that off the table, that, that's not a fear right now. The question is, what will humans, who we know well and have studied in history over, millennia, what are they going to do with these super tools? That one you want to think about, because there's a lot of bad dudes out there that will do some crazy stuff. And, but there's a lot of good people though too, who will also keep us in check. So there is a kind of a shifting going on here that we got to think about. And so what I think we need to do as a society, you kind of say, whether it's corporate leaders or business leaders or certainly political leaders and people, is we need to understand that this is not just your everyday transition with a new technology.
Yeah.
That it is going to be more disruptive. And there's another reason for that, how fast it's going to hit, and I'll give it in a second. But I always say, and if we know that and we can see that coming, then we might have to do more unusual changes to the economy or to our society to actually make that transition workable for most people. I think that is, particularly when it comes to the economy, I do think we're going to have to, and I'm got to do more work on this for my book version, so I don't have a fully developed way to think about this, but I would say it is probable that we're going to fundamentally rework how the economy works in several ways. I think it's going to be that we're going to have to break apart what you do for work and how you earn a living or live in life, from your income. That is going to have to go through some change. It might not be completely changed, but there will be, for example, we're not going to let people fall through the cracks. That has to be some kind of commitment that we're going to probably have to do. And that's why it was the tech world like 15 years ago that started thinking about universal basic income. They're just because they can see this stuff coming down the road.
Yeah.
And at some point, if you're just a human being and you're bad luck and whatever, your thing's gone, you got to help those people through. And I think we will. So there's a kind of a safety net thing, but there's also things about, it's possible that we might not be working 40 hours. I mean, 40 hours.
I don't think so either.
Knowledge workers are like 60 hours. Yeah. That's a weird historical artifact. We used to work 80 hours in the beginning of the 20th century, like everywhere, where everyone works Saturdays. It's like, we've changed shit like that.
Yeah.
So I think it's possible that humans will probably go less work in that way. But we do need meaning, and we need income to live. I mean, so there's these, how do you take those generic pieces of the puzzle of an economy and rethink it? The other thing I would just throw out there, and I talked to a lot of economists about this, it's possible that, the average productivity rate of any knowledge worker, because it's easier because that's the knowledge work is more of the AI stuff, will at least double. And could be way more than that in terms of its productivity. So in other words, whatever you could do before, you could do twice as much. So then you start thinking, well, if that's the case, you could imagine someone working 20 hours a week and I'll give you some concrete examples of this. I got an event here, a series I'm launching literally in 2 days here in San Francisco called The Great Progression. It's the physical manifestation of the Great Progression 2025, 2050. And one of my guests I'm going to interview on stage is a guy named Stephen Johnson, who was the co-founder of Notebook LM. Have you guys heard about this?
Yeah,
Notebook
for
LM?
sure. Love that.
Google.
Yeah.
Anyhow, he said they hired him or brought him into this team to co-found it because he'd written 15 books. They're kick-ass books. I've read many of them. I've known him for many years. And they hired him, said, you come in and tell us how to get AI to make it easy to write a book or better to write a book. And so he designed it with these people. And he literally told me, I was just talking to him the other day, and I'm going to have him on tomorrow, a couple days ago. He said, I can write a book 10 times to 100 times faster with Notebook LM than I used to write a book. And I've written 15 of them. And he gave me some examples when I said 100 times faster. And he said, yes. He said, because when I put all my material that I've been studying and I ask it to create a timeline for me of this and that, because he does a lot of books on science in the past and history and science and technological breakthroughs and stuff. And he just said, yeah, it would take me 2 weeks to do something that takes 30 seconds to do. And so he says, and he says for the next 5 years, he doesn't know how much further than 5 years, because he says, I don't know. In 5 years, he was reluctant to expect, but he said, for the next 5 years, I'm going to be the best freaking book author ever. I'm going to be able to crank out so many awesome books
crazy.
Way better than I ever did.
That's crazy.
And faster than I ever did. And he said, and it'll be more satisfying than I did because I got all these ideas I'd like to do. So I'm just saying, what happens when every knowledge worker is on that kind of space?
Now I feel
There
like
you
a
go.
schmuck. We've only got 1 or 2 books, Mike. I feel like a schmuck.
Well, I know I got 3, and I thought I was doing
Peter,
great.
come on,
This
get
guy's
with
got
it. You need
15.
about 50 books by next year.
I know. I should be
Steve,
cranking these things out.
Is it the Stephen Johnson that came up with the adjacent future? Is he?
Yeah. Jason, he's your buddy. He did big PBS. You guys
I love him.
Yeah, he did his
That's a great
PBS series
idea.
on how we got to now. He did that. Yeah, he's that guy. He's awesome. He's a terrific guy.
Unbelievable.
So crazy.
And he
But
was
that was
part of
Google.
Nolan.
That was like just like OpenAI just hired Johnny Ives, the design guru from Apple, to bring him in, even though he didn't know that much about AI. Same thing with Google. Google said, hey, we don't know much about writing books. Let's get this Stephen Johnson knows a book and have him work with our guys. And they created this tool that's like awesome. So I think that's what you're going to see is, everybody melding into these machines differently and figuring out how to optimize productivity. So what I'm just kind of saying is like, it's possible the economy is just going to boom. I mean, boom with productivity and productivity drives growth rates. So you can imagine the U.S. maybe in developed economies go to 4% a year rather than 2%, which is historically been a thing. So this is the kind of craziness of the moment. You're kind of thinking, well, shit, if we're making that kind of money, well, then maybe we could give a universal basic income to everybody, or whatever. There's a bunch of ways you think about it differently.
Chris will need that. Chris will need that because,
Well, Mike, we won't put this in the podcast, but Peter, we want to talk to you, especially when you get to San Francisco. So, I'm a filmmaker. I've been in Hollywood and storytelling and all this stuff. So Mike and I had something where we looked at AI and we went, wait a second. Right, Mike? They're not doing this right, especially with companions, right?
Yeah.
And so we'll talk to you. Maybe we'll bring in Peter as advisor on this thing that we're doing.
Oh, I think we probably should bring Peter.
Yeah, so let's go to the next question, though. I don't want to.
Well, we got to wrap it up, Chris. So, you take it home. Take it home. Yeah,
you got to go. Oh, okay. Well, look, I guess we'll just say to everybody, Peter, awesome. We could talk another hour, of course, on all this stuff. I mean, and please tell everybody where they can find you and tell them about the Substack and name your book again, what the title is. It's the same title, right?
Well, okay. So my name is Peter Leyden, and I don't know if you have names or you put it out there, but Peter Leyden, Leyden. It's an unusual last name, but peterleyden.com is my website. You can find everything about me. Peter Leyden at Substack is my world. I'm the Great Progression 2025 to 2050 is both my Substack world. It's also my next book that's coming out with HarperCollins. And in fact, it's when I do a lot of my public speaking, I do a lot of keynote speaking and stuff, which again, you can find through the peterleyden.com. You can find this world. I do have a strategic foresight company called Reinvent Futures that I'm the founder of. That has its own website if you want to just do that one. But I would say in terms of what we're talking about here, well, actually, that makes sense, I guess, somehow. If you need help more at a senior level leader, and I deal with senior teams, kind of helping them think about
You work with a lot of brands,
I do. I just did a big thing with the whole Airbus senior leadership came over to the Bay Area here to figure out AI, and I did the keynote for a 2-day session there. So, I mean, anyhow, I do that, but that's kind of through my strategic foresight company. But I think in general, for the average people there, follow me on Substack. It's a free thing. There is a paid version if you want to meet in gatherings, virtual gatherings. And but otherwise, just get ready for the great progression. Get open to what's happening. See it as positive, not negative. And honestly, we're going to get through this all, and it's going to be awesome.
Yeah, I mean, if you're freaked out, if you're uncertain, you don't know what's going on, Peter is your guy because he's super optimistic. He's got, like I said, he's got a track record with this. He's written a book already about the first 25 years of this century, and then this is the next 25. And I think it'll be very uplifting and help you to be more relevant, right, Mike?
Oh, and certainly more human. And I think that's the big piece. Peter, you were so great. We're going to have you back on. We're excited to see you at Human Tech Week. So for our listeners, be sure you check out Human Tech Week in San Francisco. That's, what was that, June 16th through the
17th to the
20th,
I think.
20th? Yeah.
Something like
there
that.
In San Francisco. So Peter, you're going to be on the panel.
Well, maybe we'll have some videos from that. We'll see. I don't know.
Yeah. But Peter, thank you for being on the show. You are tremendous. And Chris, we will have him back. And maybe we'll do a special episode where we do 90 minutes where we just start breaking some of this stuff
He's
down.
great with Garrett. He's great. And I know he'd come on because he loves speech. So, I mean, that might be fun too.
Yeah, I think that would be
fun. Kind of ping back and forth between where they are. But But definitely what Peter Beck. And, I just want to tell everybody out there, be sure to hit the subscribe button, because we're doing this. We're elevating, we're trying to make things more optimistic, more positive with the Rise of Humanists. And so if you want to stay ahead of the bots, subscribe to the podcast. And remember, as we've been saying, in the AI age, it's being active is still a human skill. So you have to actually use your mouse and hit the button. So Mike, till next time, stay curious.
And stay human.
All right, keep rising. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Be sure to subscribe to our podcast, either on Spotify, Podbean. Leave us a review there as well.
Share this episode with your friends, and check out the Rise of Humanists on YouTube for bonus clips.
Visit our Facebook community, our website, www.itsvukamax.com. All right, guys, we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
The rise of humanness in the age of AI. It's a podcast with Chris and Mike. The rise of humanness in the age of AI. Stay curious, stay human, let's rise.